We are all good. All right. So, we are, if you've been here for the last couple of years, we've been slowly walking through Matthew, right? We're going to get back to that in a couple weeks. But there's something about, if you've been here for some of that, you've kind of got an idea of what Jesus is up to. But if you haven't been, it's okay, I'm going to catch you up. So there's some things that Jesus is doing, and what I want to do today is get us to, how do we get to the triumphal entry? How does this Holy Week happen? How do we end up getting to the cross, right? Because there's a lot of things going on in the background that we should be aware of. And so you've kind of got an idea if you're here from Matthew, but there's some things that Jesus is doing that irritates the religious elite. He spends his time doing things that would make people unclean. He's hanging out with tax collectors. He's hanging out with women. He's touched a leper, right? He's done all these different things, and all those things can technically make you unclean in the Jewish religion and their ritual systems. So, and this is kind of if you're familiar with the Good Samaritan story, right? Those the priest and the Levite that walk by on the other side of the road. It's because they didn't want to be unclean, right? And so, because then they wouldn't be able to do their religious duties, right? So they let a man die so that they could be religious. And it's a wild way. It's not, and that's what Jesus kind of gets away with. But so the things that Jesus is actively doing, they do not sit well with the religious elite. But it's not just the things that he's doing. It's also the things that Jesus is saying that rubs people the wrong way. Jesus is saying a lot of things about the leaders, about the teachers, the scribes, that they don't take kindly to. And so what I want to do is I want to look at two major stories that get us to Palm Sunday. And they're one is a divine claim and one would be a divine act, all right? And these two things really set the stage for everything that's going on. So if you have your Bible, we're going to start in John chapter 8 and pick up at verse 42. This is kind of the middle of a conversation between Jesus and the Pharisees, all right, the religious elite. So Jesus said to them, if God were your father, you would love me. By the way, they don't love him, all right? If you haven't been, they do not love him. For I have come here from God. I have not come on my own. God sent me. Why is my language not clear to you? Because you are unable to hear what I say. You belong to your father, the devil, and you want to carry out your father's desires. Jesus is not making friends, right? Not making friends in this moment. And verse 46 says, can any of you prove me guilty of sin? If I'm telling the truth, why don't you believe me? Whoever belongs to God hears what God says. The reason you do not hear is that you do not belong to God. In verse 48, says, the Jews answered him. And I wanted to stop here for a moment. It's a long passage, but the Gospel of John's Gospel, has historically been used to empower some anti-Semitic type of language and action. And so, because John just kind of throws around this term, the Jews, right? And that's kind of his main phrasing when he talks about the religious elite, all right? So, because what we got to understand is, remember, Jesus is Jewish, right? Jesus is Jewish. The Pharisees are Jewish. The scribes are Jewish. His followers are mainly Jewish, right? So when John's saying the Jews, don't read it as like a negative. He means it negatively, but he means it towards the scribes and the Pharisees, all right? I just wanted to make sure we were clear. The gospel, it's a Jewish story. It's kind of a confrontation within a family, okay? So let's keep going. Verse 48. The Jews answered him, aren't we right in saying that you are a Samaritan and demon-possessed? They're like, this guy is absolutely crazy. Like, I am not possessed by a demon, said Jesus, but I honor my Father and you dishonor me. I am not seeking glory for myself, but there is one who seeks it, and he is the judge. Very truly, I tell you, whoever obeys my word will never see death. That's a wild thing to say, right? No one says those types of things. And so it says this, at this they exclaimed, now we know you're demon-possessed. Abraham died, and so did the prophets, yet you say that whoever obeys your word will never taste death. Are you greater than our father Abraham? He died, and so did the prophets. Who do you think you are? Who do you think you are? That's the crowd's question, but I think they ask it a little bit sarcastically. But it's the question. It's the question behind every story we read. It's the question behind Jesus calming the storm. Who is this man? Right? When he releases a demon from the people, it's like, who is this man? Right? It's how can this man do these things? Who is he? Who do you think you are? And so I think not only are they asking, I think it's something that we also have to ask. Who do we think that Jesus is? And so Jesus is going to tell them, and they're not going to like it. Verse 54, Jesus replied, if I glorify myself, my glory means nothing. My Father, whom you claim as your God, is the one who glorifies me. Though you do not know him, I know him. If I said I did not, I would be a liar like you. It's little zingers. Jesus is good with the zingers. And so it's like, but I do know him and obey his word. And now watch this. Verse 56. Your father Abraham rejoiced at the thought of seeing my day. He saw it and was glad. And this is what they said. They said, you are not 50 years old, and you've seen Abraham? And Jesus says, very truly I tell you, before Abraham was born, I am. And at this they picked up stones to stone him, but Jesus hid himself, slipping away from the temple guards. So a couple of things here. So before Abraham was born, so last week we talked about Moses and the burning bush. We covered like a 2,000-year span last week. If you missed it, I'm sorry. But so there was in the bush, when Moses goes to the burning bush, and God sends him to rescue Israel from Egypt, right? Moses says, well, who do I tell them sent me? Right? He says, who do I tell them sent me? And God says, tell them I am has sent you. Right? And so I am becomes this kind of name for God that really doesn't get uttered. And so what Jesus is doing here, he's not just saying I'm a good teacher, right? Jesus is doing something, and we know by their reaction, right? Because the reaction is to stone him. And so here's the thing: it is not legal to stone someone for claiming to be the Messiah. Okay? There was people claiming to be the Messiah before Jesus. There's people claiming to be the Messiah after Jesus. Now, you're going to raise some eyes, right? I mean, the leaders of Rome don't want to hear about a savior or a king that will rise up, so you're going to get their attention. But the Jews, that's not something that they're legal allowed to do. They can only do it if you blaspheme God. And so by saying, I am, right? He doesn't say anything. He just says, I am. And so Jesus, they're going, who do you think you are? And he goes, it's almost the same question that Moses asked. Who do I tell them sent me? I am sent you. And they go, who do you think you are? And he goes, I am. And they picked up stones to stone him. And so while claiming to be divine, so his followers, so not only were the religious elite, beyond themselves, they were trying to kill him, and he goes off and hides. But I imagine even his followers had to be like, did he say what I think he said? Right? Like what's going on? Like, we've seen a lot of things, Jesus. Like, you've done a lot of wild miracles, walking on water, like all this stuff, and we've been blown away by it. But what you just said is wild. And so he goes into hiding for about 5 months. So this takes place this conversation about 6 months before Palm Sunday. All right? So it's about 6 months early. And so Jesus then, he says this, and they are after him. And so he ends up going into hiding for nearly 5 months, and until he comes back. And then there's this famous story that when he finally shows back up, I mean, there's some stuff in between a little bit, but it's about 5 months go by from that divine claim, and then we're going to get a divine act, okay? And so the tension is not decreased, okay? Jesus heard that his best friend Lazarus was sick. So John 11 says this, verse 6, we'll pick up. So when he heard that Lazarus was sick, he stayed where he was 2 more days. And then he said to his disciples, "Let us go back to Judea." "But Rabbi," they said, "a short while ago the Jews there tried to stone you, and you're going to go back?" I love that he's like, "And you're going back?" He's like, "I'm not going back," right? So you go ahead. So the tensions, again, are really high, right? And the disciples have no desire to go back. And so Jesus, I know you love Lazarus, but us dying too does not help him, right? It's like, we do not want to go back to Jerusalem. Well, because it's actually in Bethany, which is actually only 2 miles from Jerusalem, right? So it's very close to where all that went down. And so it says in verse 11, he went on to tell them, "Our friend Lazarus has fallen asleep, but I am going there to wake him." His disciples replied, "Lord, if he sleeps, he'll get better." Jesus had been speaking of his death, but his disciples thought he meant natural sleep. So when he told them plainly, "Lazarus is dead," I just imagine his eyes rolling all the way back in his head sometimes. And not just when he deals with the disciples, when he deals with me. Because there's something, this is one of the things that I love about our scriptures. And this is, I think, a big reason you can trust them. They don't take out the things that make them look stupid, right? They don't take out all the times that Jesus corrects them. Just change these words a little bit when you write it, so Jesus looks like he knows what he's talking about. We look like we know what we're talking about, right? And we all just kind of go about our days, but it's like that's not what happens. Like, it reminds us, it can remind us that Jesus is the one who knows, and his patience is enough. He is patient with them, and he is patient with me, and he is patient with you. Because if you ever felt like, I don't get it. Have you ever, anyone felt like you don't get it? Okay. You're good. You're in good company, right? Because these guys still didn't get it. And Jesus is going to say it again, but you're not alone. Verse 15. "And for your sake, I am glad I was not there, so that you may believe." Right? So Jesus is still, this is talking to his disciples, right? And he's like, "I'm going to do this so that you may believe." Right? So his disciples still aren't sure about, who does this guy think he is? And so you'll love this part. "Then Thomas, also known as Didymus," this is the famous, infamous doubting Thomas, right? Who gets picked on every Easter. All right? I'll still probably pick on him next week, but this week he gets his credit, okay? Watch this. It says this. "So then Thomas said to the rest of his disciples, 'Let us also go, that we may die with him.'" Now, I don't know if that's amazing faith or a complete lack of it. I'm not sure which one it is, right? But a lot of it is I love that about Thomas. But a lot of this, it's a picture of what it really looks like to follow Jesus. Because it's not always clear what you're getting into. Anybody? It's not always clear what you're getting into when you get in with Jesus. I can testify to that. This is one of the reasons that I love the Methodist idea of prevenient grace. Okay, it's this idea that God goes before us into spaces, that God has been working in our lives in order that then to connect with God, right? So God is ahead of us and out in front of us. And so it's kind of this idea. There's this book, Christ of the Indian Road, and it's about a missionary to India. And he says this in his book. His name is E. Stanley Jones. And he says this. I love it. He says, so Christ and the facts not only command us to go, but Jesus, standing in the east, beckons us to come. He is there, deeply there before us. We not only take him, but we go to him. And so that's the prevenient grace, that the grace that goes before us. And so the Methodist understanding is that wherever we're headed, God is already there working. God is already preparing a place, right, for us to work and to go. And so that's the hope, I think, that Thomas sees. It's just, I don't know Jesus, but wherever you're going, I'm going. Even if I think you're wrong. You know what I mean? That's what he's saying. And so it's like, yes, I've been there. It's like, God, I'm not king of my life, and so I'm going to trust you, right? And it does get us into some trouble. On a smaller scale, for instance, not much like this story, but for me, going into seminary was a step of faith. I had this amazing offer in front of me for a full ride to get my master's degree, but it meant I would have to keep my part-time job, keep this job, and still do all the things that a husband and father are supposed to do, and get, and I got to keep like a 3-point something to keep my, my scholarships, right? And so we had conversations, right? It's like, so in the summer, can I save up? And and then during the school year, my wife's Ashley's picking up where I'm dropping off, and when I have a break, I try to catch things up, right? So, but what it did is it took some planning, right? It took some planning, and so that's where I want to talk when we talk about a step of faith, right? There's nothing in the Bible really about a leap of faith. Like we always talk about that's like Indiana Jones a little bit, right? It's this step of faith. Right, and a step of faith is this, yes, I don't know what I'm doing. Yes, I know it looks crazy, but you also do prepare the things around you. Like I didn't just show up to class, right? I didn't just do that, but it does want to kill me someday. But it's like, God, I'm just going to take another step, and that is the entire life of the disciples with Jesus. It is just another step, and sometimes they go, what? And then they still take another step, right? It's not a leap of faith. It's a step of faith. And I think sometimes because Jesus over and over, right? He says, if we covered this in Matthew, he says, remember, if you plan to build something, you better know the cost, because then you start building, you can't finish it, everyone's going to mock you, right? It's because you took a leap instead of a step, right? You didn't plan. And so I just want to encourage you that if you feel like God's calling you to something, the step can literally just be having a discussion with your loved ones or with yourself, right? Maybe you've been putting off a conversation. It's like, but if God's calling you to something, just take a step. Take a step. Verse 17 says this: on his arrival, Jesus found that Lazarus had already been in the tomb for 4 days. So we can't unpack this entire story today, right? But basically what that meant, for him to be in there 4 days, after 3 days of being dead, for the Jews, you were considered dead, right? Right? You're double dead. You can't come back from double dead. And so because they had heard stories, they had seen things happen, maybe that happened, a day or two, like maybe something happened, but no one had ever seen or heard of someone coming back to life after 3 days, right? And so what Jesus does, and so that's the divine act, right? It's that Jesus is doing things that no one else can do. And so not only did he claim to be the great I am, right? He then backs it up by doing something only the great I am can do. Jesus waited on purpose. People thought he was too late, but he was right on time. You ever feel that? Jesus, you're late. Jesus, you're late. I needed you. Where were you? Why didn't you come through back then? Why didn't you fix that for me? Why didn't you heal that person? Like, why didn't you let me find out about that sooner? Why did, God, where were you? And God is never late. Whether we love it or hate it, God is never late. And so Jesus purposely showed up too late so he could demonstrate the power of I am. And so when Lazarus walks out of that tomb, listen, people are shaken. Shaken. That's scary. I mean, they rolled back the tomb. They're really like, Jesus, you can't roll that stone away. It's going to stink. It's going to be bad. It's just, Jesus, come on. We know you do amazing things, but let's leave this one alone. And they would have been stunned. And so in John 11, verse 53, it says this: so from that day on, they plotted to take his life. Therefore, Jesus no longer moved about publicly among the people of Judea. Instead, he withdrew to a region near the wilderness, to a village called Ephraim, where he stayed with his disciples. When it was almost time for the Jewish Passover, many went up from the country to Jerusalem for their ceremonial cleansing before the Passover, right? So they would go early. They'd get there before Passover, maybe a week or two. They kept looking for Jesus. As they stood in the temple courts, they asked one another, "What do you think? Is he coming to the festival at all?" But the chief priests and the Pharisees had given orders that anyone who found out where Jesus was should report it so they might arrest him. This happens 2 miles away and 2 weeks out from the largest celebration of the year. Remember last week we talked about Passover, right? We discussed it's the pinnacle moment in Jewish history, right? It's the story that began it all. There's a Jewish, first century Jewish historian, Josephus. He said that Jerusalem during Passover could swell from the tens of thousands normally to hundreds of thousands of people in these 2 or 3 weeks where people are coming and getting ready. So you're talking about a place, a groundswell, hundreds of thousands of people that are going, is he coming? Is he going to be here? Families are arriving. Merchants are setting up. Pilgrims are purifying themselves, getting ready to celebrate freedom. But there's something else in the air that year. There's something different. They'd heard what happened in Bethany to Lazarus, about the man who had been dead for 4 days, walking out of a tomb. They had heard that Jesus had vanished afterwards, slipping into the wilderness. They knew that they had had to kill him. They knew that he had said that I am the great I am. And now the question is everywhere, do you think he'll come? Is he going to show up at the festival? Is this it? Is this the moment where he brings us to freedom? Because they're not just wondering if he'll come, they're planning to arrest him if he does. But the people are split. Some are afraid, some are expectant, some ready for a revolution. And everyone is waiting. The air is tight with tension, like the moment before a storm, like something holy is about to break open. And right then, no one knows what's going to happen next. And Jesus rides in on a donkey.